It's time to start ولا
Yeah, yes, yeah.
Assalamu alaikum,
Okay.
everyone. I think let's begin. It's 10:07 or the respective times in your area. Let's begin our today's session, third session after Ramadan, with the Surah Al-Fatiha. So today's session is about the issue of worldview in economics and finance. I hope the participants have read the recommended material and also watched the Maqasid methodology book chapter or pages dedicated for this issue. So without further ado, let's begin our lecture today. Over to you, Dr. Ilbus.
اوكي اعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Alhamdulillah, welcome everyone. Really, I hope it is a lovely day or evening or morning for every one of you. And here we will talk today about the an issue which is kind of fundamental, and you might find it a little bit philosophical, but then any philosophy is something that really affects our way of thinking, and so this is it's like a preamble to our next what other upcoming sessions where we will talk about the methodology itself. And so we start with the idea of worldview. Of course, it is something that I think everyone understands what it is, and so we will discuss this today. But then, how it is all related to what we are discussing, the economics and finance, and how we can re-envision this. This discipline, if we can call it that way. So this is what we're going to cover today. Even though we even joked with Dr. Zaid right before that we have material to cover for 6 hours, and we will try to breeze through this as meaningfully as possible. But then still, we would need to have some time for discussion, and hopefully we can have that discussion. And well, I would personally would suggest maybe if we can go beyond 2 hours, I'm all for it. But let's try to keep at 2 hours with all the discussion and everything, inshallah. And so this is what we are going to cover, the idea of worldview, and from different perspectives, from different scholars, and also the idea of tawheed and purposefulness, and how what are the implications on the study of the economy, and the application of worldview and some challenges, and we will talk about some examples. And lastly, the economic phenomena. What do we mean by economic phenomena, and what is the scope of that reimagined discipline? That last point is just an indication of what what I think, and then maybe we can add to it. Well, if you think that it is more or less comprehensive, we can leave it at that, or you can suggest some additions to it. Before I start, and of course, every time I start, I would like to start with either with the Quran al-Karim, or maybe with some hadith or some story. And for today, I will start with the Quran, of course. But before that, there is one thing that is really related to our worldview. I wanted to just raise the question or the issue that we we tend to, when it comes to the socio-political issues, we tend to talk at a very high level, really at the very high level. And but at the same time, we wherever we come from, I mean, we are in so many areas of the world. We are scattered all over. But then what we see in our realities and our everyday reality is that the Quran and the ethics of Quran and the Islamic ethics, they are not translated into actions. And one very simple example is that it's not translated is in the cleanliness of our environments. And I live in Istanbul, and I lived in Malaysia for quite a while. And I have heard, and I know about many other jurisdictions and many other countries where people just don't care. I mean, with the countries where the majority are Muslims, people just don't care about the environment. And so you see, and I happen to live in Malaysia, and I would witness it every day where people just throw rubbish out of the windows, and it's just we at the same time we talk about some very high stuff, and we expect the world to listen to us, but at the same time we cannot keep our our environments clean. So this is a representation of where we are. I mean, this is a representation of how the worldview it's not translated into our actions. We may have it in our books, in our in our literature, maybe in our tradition, but it is hardly translated into our everyday actions. And we see all sorts of social ills, social problems, and they all happen to be in our respective societies. So I've seen it in Malaysia. I'm seeing it in Turkey, and I'm sure it is all over in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, in India, and in so many other countries. You can, I'm sure you have so many ideas that just some pictures that pop into your mind. And this is a representation. That's a problem of worldview. So on the one hand, we have the Quran, we have the literature, we have the ethics and aqidah. But on the other hand, reality is something completely different. And so this is where we need to again and again, remind ourselves that the piety is not something. The piety is not something in our physical rituals, even though it is important, and facing Qibla is important in the prayer. But the real piety is in belief, and also that belief translates in action. And the action is here. You can see, and spends his substance or his rizq upon his near of kin and orphans and the needy. So in this ayah, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ليس البر أن تولوا وجوهكم قبل المشرق والمغرب. And so this is a form. But the more important thing, rather than the form, is the essence of it. And the essence is in the belief and also in action. And the action here, وَآتَ الْمَالَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ. And you spend out of what Allah has given you, even though you really love it and you love it and cherish it, and you give it to the relatives and the orphans, the needy, the welfare and others. And then it comes to the prayer, and then again another. Even though we consider it, we're at the zakat, even though we consider it part of the Islam as a ritual part, but then it is also an economic part. So it is all interrelated. The belief our actions and our actions in economic terms and also in our society. So this is a very important part in idea of the worldview in our economies. And so here in another ayah in Surah Al-Baqarah, here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَنفِقُوا مِنْ طَيِّبَاتِ مَا كَسَبْتُمْ. So all you have, all the believers, spent out of what, spent on others of the good things that you may have acquired. وَمِمَّا أَخْرَجْنَا لَكُم مِنَ الْأَرْضِ ولا تيمموا الخبيث منه تنفقون ولستم بآخذيه إلا أن تغمضوا فيه. So and the out of what spent out of what, not of the bad things that you yourself will not consume unless you take it with your closed eyes or you take it with disdain. So this is also the part of the Islamic worldview and in relation to the economic life, to transactions. And lastly here, of course, there are so many other examples from Surah Al Imran. لن تنالوا البر حتى تنفقوا مما تحبون. So all believers, never shall you attain true piety unless you spend on others out of what you cherish yourselves. So these and many other ayats also in Surah Al-Baqarah, even right before the ayats on riba, you'll see the whole section talking about infaq, about spending, on who to spend, why to spend, who on out of what. So this is an important part in understanding the basics, really the basics of transactions or the basics of philosophy, Islamic philosophy, in relation to economic transactions. And so we come to the idea of worldview, and it's a set of belief or guiding principles. We can, in today's language, in English, we can call it worldview. In German, it's Weltanschauung, and in Arabic we can call it aqidah. But basically, it is aqidah. It is a set of beliefs that we are supposed to understand and follow. And so it affects the way we think and make decisions. And when you witness in societies, that behavior, antisocial behavior, or just throwing rubbish out of windows. This is part of the worldview of those people. And so, because they make decision every time that we make a decision to follow ethical guidelines or not to follow, it's showing what kind of aqidah we have, and whether we internalize that aqidah within ourselves, and whether we practice them. And so it generates our perception, and it defines the quality and extent of scholarship. In terms of scholarship, how it defines the quality and extent is that do we take the Quran seriously? Do we take it only as a means to quote some ayats? Or does it really translate into our internal condition? And does it translate into our behavior with other people, our relationship with other people, and with the environment? And so the worldview actually generates the perception of the present and the vision for the future, and also our belief or our understanding of the past. And so through worldview, the worldview is shaped by many factors, and among those factors are our education, our upbringing, belonging to certain groups, to a certain school of thought, also maybe also belonging to a certain political party or political leanings. So all of them, they actually form our worldview, and it is dynamic. The worldview is quite dynamic. It changes from time to time, and what we used to believe, and let's say 20 years ago, today we might be different, too much different, or maybe just a little bit different, depending on certain factors. So why do we need to discuss worldviews? Last week we discussed limitations, and in my understanding, those limitations actually stem from the absence of a robust worldview. And I shared earlier we shared the book by late Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman, rahimahullah. And in his book, The Quranic Worldview, and I quote from it, he says, "It is the Islamic worldview which determines and governs the way of thinking, with its related principles, concepts, and values, as well as the goals and higher aims which they seek to fulfill. And this worldview should be reflected in a cogent, coherent, scientific manner in the structure of an Islamic society's way of thinking, as well as in the ways in which this way of thinking is applied and the outcomes to which it leads." So basically, the worldview, it is related to outcomes. It is related to how we understand and practice all these principles and concepts, values, and the aims. And so it is definitely the part of it. It has a bearing, or it affects the state of reform and renewal, or the state of Islah and Tajdeed in our societies, in our communities. And so this Islah and Tajdeed is possible only if we change the mindset. And it is easy to blame others. It is easy to blame the colonialists and the powers and so on. But it is actually starts with our own selves, with our own thinking at the personal level, and also it translates into gradually translates into relations and the thinking of the community and the society at large. One thing I wanted also to remind here, or maybe to revisit, or to think together with you to present this idea, is that why all the prophets were shepherds, and even in one of the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he said, as narrated by Abu Huraira, that and he said that all the prophets were if I'm not mistaken, the text is something like the Allah did not send any prophet except that he was a shepherd. And shepherding is actually is a very complex matter. It's really, you have to be very skillful in managing the flock. And you have to really take into consideration so many things, and start in the morning and be outdoors for most of the day, and be with the animals and with some other groups. And animals, they have their own personalities, and there are some leaders. There are some those who try to misbehave, and also there is some specific path you want to follow that path. But in the end, what you do as a shepherd is you take care of the needs of the flock. It's not you're not following following the flock. I mean, the flock doesn't follow you as a shepherd, but you attend to their needs. And the needs are the need for fresh air, for water, for grazing, for grass, grazing land, and they have to stop at certain time. they have to rest in the midday, and so on. And there are so many other things involved in the whole shepherding. And actually, Dr. Basma Abdul Ghaffar, she has a very interesting, I think, course, and we hope maybe she can also offer this kind of course on shepherding. But it's relevant. It is relevant to what we discuss, even though at a very small scale. And I'm sure you have read the worldview and associated elements, from Jasser Uda's book. And he talks about the necessity of renewing the fiqh and how it is all related to the issue of knowledge and the ilm, and how we can understand ilm, and the need to understand the logic of the revelation. And even this morning we touched upon the issue of logic in the Quran. And 100 years ago, this Sheikh Musa Jarullah Digif, he even also talked about the logic of the Quran being not Aristotelian. It's holistic logic. And so, and it is related to reality and waqi', and the scholarship, the ijtihad should be built on this, on the renewed idea of fiqh, and our deeper understanding of knowledge, and application in al-waqi', in reality. And so this book is, I think, instrumental in terms of understanding Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman's idea about what is Quranic worldview. And I think it should be a major reading material for those who study Islamic thought. And even before that, before this book, I would recommend the book on the crisis in the Muslim mind. So that's another by the same author, rahimahullah. And so I would just recommend you to look at it and see all the tools and approaches to how the Quranic worldview can be implemented. And just lastly, I want to, before we stop for for a few minutes, I want to just talk a little bit about this chart here. It was developed by Dr. Basma Abdul Ghaffar, our vice president, and she actually presented this in Turkey about 2 years ago when we had our function here in Istanbul. And she talked about innovation, and before talking about innovation, she actually talked about this worldview, that it is purposeful, it is interconnected, and holistic. And here I just want to highlight one thing, just a couple of things I would say. In terms of purposefulness, we know that we have a purpose of worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we do it willfully. We do it we obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala willfully, but we need to understand, we have to develop fiqh of how to do that. I mean, it's an application. And so our worship is not just it's not just in the masjid, it's not just in the rituals, but it is more than that. And so we, even though we need some inspiration for that, but then fiqh is something that we build. We need to build ourselves, our own understanding of that. And interconnectedness is that we have the dependencies. We have different dependencies. So on the higher level, we are dependent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala completely. And so tughyan, or the sinfulness is something that we believe ourselves higher than that. We are independent of Allah. So it's a misunderstanding of our role in this world. And then intradependencies, we need to understand our own selves also. What is my role in this life, and what are the how can I depend on myself and be dependent on others, And belief actually is something that it is also related, iman related to aman, security. So we provide security to others, and this way we are secure with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we are interdependent as well on other believers, on other creation, on the whole nature. And the holistic understanding of all of this is that Islam in its nature through the Tawheed is that Islam is constructive. We are not destructive by nature. And so we understand the diversity in in thought. We accept the diversity because it is the Sunnatullah. The diversity is Sunnatullah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala built everything in measure and in balance. So with this, I just want to stop for for a while, and after that, maybe we can just spend just a few minutes discussing the worldview, and then Dr. Zaid will take over. So if there are any comments on or questions or comments on the significance of worldview in developing our thought, our economic thought, maybe. Any comments, please? Yes, Brother Jilani, please go ahead.
Yes, could you? I know a lot of this is in the books that you've already referenced, but could you summarize the first part in a PowerPoint or something, so we have it for reference?
Summarize. What do you mean? The whole?
Not the whole thing. No, not the whole thing. No, not the whole thing, because that would take too long. I mean, you just gave a commentary for about 15 minutes, right? How long would it be?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So maybe just put the key points down, so that because
okay, all right.
slightly different opinions out there. So it's worth just a summary opinion is actually good.
Okay, all right. So I started with the idea that quite often our worldview, what we find in the Quran and in the Sunnah that we read, that we study, quite often is not translated into actions. All right, and I presented the idea that we see a lot of environmental littering and the pollution in the world around us. And this is a representation, representative
if
of our world.
you don't mind, what I meant was, I didn't mean to go over it now. I mean maybe for later, so just so we have it.
Okay, all right,
yeah,
all right.
Because otherwise you'll have to do the whole thing again, which
yes.
there's no point doing that, right? Yeah. So I just put it down in a bullet point, because I heard it the first time, but I think it just helps when you have it for reference later on. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, sure.
Okay, all right, sure,
yeah.
Sure. Tamam. We'll do that. We'll do that. Any other comments or questions on this specific topic?
Yeah. Assalamualaikum, Professor.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Yeah. Prof, question, Prof. Would it be conflicting if we are looking, we're having an Islamic worldview and reimagining economics, but then we have to relay that to non-Muslims? So, like, would there be a gap, and how do we bridge that gap? Because then we're going to be, I'm imagining we're going to be having a strong stand on what Islamic worldview is, and then we're going to try to bridge that with the rest of the world. But they would also have a strong stand on where they're coming from a circular perspective, from like a Jewish or Christian orthodoxy perspective. So then how do we like work around that aspect?
I think the better explanation would be in the video that Sister Ambreen actually shared with us. It's what Prof. Jasser he talked about in his lecture in Malaysia with Prime Minister. I mean, it's a what was it, professorial lecture or something? That happened in February 24, I think, in end of February. And in that, he talked about the idea between what is dini and what is madani. And dini is religious, and we tend to talk a lot about the religious. And what is madani or civilization? Civilized is also dini. It's also religious. And part of it, what is madani or what is civilized, part of it is also, you can call it secular. And there are some people who are with us in terms of on certain economic ideas. Let's say the environmental issues and the energy issues and so on. They can be in the same having kind of the same understanding or same approaches. Even though they may have some other philosophical approach to it. And so this is where we can have we can build bridges in this way. So even though we are different in terms of maybe this aqidah, what we're seeing here, the Tawhidic paradigm, but people from other paradigms, they have in daily lives, in economic transactions, in dealings with other people, they may have the approaches and methodologies which are close to us, and this is where we can bridge those gaps. And I would really encourage you to watch that video, that lecture by Pro Jasser, even though it is delivered in a simple language, but it is really related to what we're talking about here. So
if you allow me, what is the purpose to begin with of these conversations? I hope it's not to unify perspective and for all of us to have one perspective. And number one is that it is good to exchange ideas and part of the process of لتعارفوا, and we benefit from each other's ideas and thoughts. Sometime we'll get into so one of the main reasons, like we're talking about the worldview here, and we're connecting worldview to aqidah. And this is an important connection as far as I'm concerned. Like even if we have as Muslims as part of our revival, is to represent our aqidah, not as exactly the technical aspects of believing in Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, wal-Asma' wal-Sifat, but what does that mean that the God is the creator and maintainer of all this world? What does that mean in all the spheres of life? So if we connect it, then we take this as axiomatic. We take this as Rabbul Alameen, as axiomatic, that we have to think of humanity versus nature versus other animal life versus even all creations as having an interdependent. Right? You're all one ecosystem. So abusing one leads to abusing ourselves, not maintaining the balance in this in our affairs then leads to harm. And somebody needs to mute there. Yeah, so that's in short. I would say the perspective. Just come at this conversation with not necessarily even convincing the other side. Let that aside. That's not even maybe the starting point. Just have a conversation, exchange ideas, and then inshallah. And sometimes it's like a difference in the short-term perspective versus long-term perspective makes a big difference. And what makes sense and what does not make sense. So please keep that in mind. Allah. Brother Daniel.
Daniel, yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, I think my camera is not working. I've requested my wife to, correct it. Let's see, maybe she'll be able to do that. Anyhow, so this worldview. Anyway, somebody who has developed it, I think they have put in a lot of effort, mashallah, to develop it. It looks quite comprehensive and detailed. However, what I want to ask is, when worldviews are defined in such a detail, is it possible that, we might get stuck into details? And because, worldview, the nature of worldview is to, guide you in the broader realm, I guess. So this is very detailed. For example, when grounded theory was proposed initially, the people who proposed it, they were very excited that, they are proposing an inductive method which will, bring forth new theories. However, now when we see the what you call debate and discussion on grounded theory, it is basically argued that, grounded theorists, especially those individuals who follow the classic methodology of grounded theory, they're stuck into data. They cannot come out of it because, they're in a way, it's like a spider, and a spider is to catch certain insects or something like that. It's just a concern which I'm, putting forth. It would be nice if you can comment it. However, it's very detailed and mashallah, it's very nice. And I can see that, somebody who has proposed it, they have put in a lot of effort. But what I want to understand is that, a common Muslim does not understand these details. So a worldview, is it a worldview only for the academics or it's for common people as well? And how would they relate with it, just a concern, maybe if you can address it.
Yeah, thank you. Well, this is exactly why I started with the idea of pollution, environmental pollution and littering, is the ordinary people who are they accept the idea of worship just to be confined to the masjid or to prayer. So this is where we, maybe as scholars and maybe and also as students of knowledge, we have to understand and define and convey this idea that ليس البر أن تولوا وجوهكم قبل المشرق والمغرب. So it's not only form, and it's not form. It is the essence that we have to talk about. And this is where the scholarship is really the role of the scholars and ulama and students of knowledge is to convey this idea that is this connection with Allah and dependency on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and these ideas of whether you call it aqidah or belief or Weltanschauung and worldview, it's still the same. We need to understand the essence of it, right, and how it should translate to our like daily life, so that so that people understand that littering is it's not a simple thing. That you have to be that you are going to be answerable, because we may just casually throw something out there, and then some bird picks it up, and it dies because of you, or some other creature dies because what you have littered. And so we have to really understand our place in the world and our role as the Khalifa. That we are here not only to build something, but also to take care. So Umran is actually taking care of this earth.
And of course, we're talking at two different levels here. I mean, there is the awam, and they may not need to know all these differences and details. But as people who are educated, we hear the terminology of worldview, the terminology of a paradigm all the time. And I feel like it is important to connect these terminology to our aqidah, to our Quranic worldview, and so on and so forth. And these details that come from like the slide that you are looking, this is just this scholarship, and this scholarship does have an impact on what we are doing when we analyze phenomena and think about phenomena. This is coming from these details, like we're talking about holism. We want to be, we appreciate, we recognize diversity, we pay attention to the measure that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put, the balance, so on and so forth. I mean, that is just the function of scholarship. But in scholarship, you understand all of this for practical purpose at the end of this exercise, not just simply for luxury of nice thinking, but it's actually to make an impact. Allah Alam.
Okay, so Dr. Zaid, maybe you could proceed with your section.
Allah is khair. تفضل, please. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala rasulillah. So here again, we are a little bit emphasizing what this tawheed, purposefulness, as worldview, as a paradigm. So here we're saying tawheed and aqidah. And of course, tawheed is the number one topic we study in aqidah. And this is recognition of an ultimate ownership of the world and its resources. And that is incredibly important when we think versus about ownership, property rights. What does it mean to be a billionaire or a millionaire, so on and so forth? To a certain degree, sometimes I lament the absence of Muslim billionaires because I see billionaires left and right affecting policies and affecting even impacting student activism in US colleges. Immediately here, the billionaires are calling the college to influence decision making. But then upon further reflection, sometimes can you become a billionaire without doing a lot of without skimming and mistreating and maybe taking the rights or taking more than your share of wealth from potentially millions of people? So maybe it's a good thing that we don't have billionaires. So there is this challenge is that can you become a billionaire without actually being somebody who is mistreating or like taking the rights of others, not treating others properly. So this really, once we have this concept sink in our mind, then really our concept of ownership and that we are only guardians of over what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us it's incredibly impactful and important to recognize in the management of economic affairs and in finance. And the importance of Tawheed and this concept and the worldview, a recognition of the inherent weakness of knowledge systems and models built on human reasoning alone. And whether it is human reasoning or human experience or whatever we want to say, that as long as whatever we are trying to do does not incorporate the revelation and the Tawheed, then it will suffer from major shortcomings. And then here, of course, an important part of this is recognition of humanity's role and purpose, that we are the ibad of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that we have prophets, that we have followers. And so this is all incredibly important part of what we are discussing here. And of course, we can go into details and all of this. Part of it is basic Islamic education and training that we have gone through. But here, if we move on, so implications for the field of economics and finance. So here would like, in a sense, try to provoke some deeper thinking and critical analysis from all of us here. Is that do we agree that the purpose of economics should be to promote collective well-being of all creations, al-alamin, as a manifestation of our tawheed, worship and obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So this is one way to define economics and the goal of economics. And you see, I'm not going into Islamic economics versus economics. I'm just saying we want the proper economic, the best economics, thinking here. And the other related question is, or maybe there is a different ultimate purpose. Maybe is it the well-being of all creations? And here, of course, I'm clearly saying that there can be the ultimate purpose here is tawheed and worship and obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, that I have not created ins, humanity, and all the creation except to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So under that general guidance, is this the purpose of economics, promoting collective well-being? If not, what is it? And then here the second component is that we're talking, sometimes we start talking about economic policies. And then should be, and they're saying economic policy should be guided by Tawheed paradigm and the Revelations guidance. So this is, are we in agreement about these, objectives? So assuming that we are in agreement, and of course we can have your opinions on both of them, but I would love to kind of finish some this idea before moving on, is that if you go to the next slide, is that, so here, the implication is that when it's asked about how, then this will get into some interesting questions. Is economics positive or a normative field of knowledge or science? And sometimes it is important to be clear on the difference between these different approaches or functions, because my feeling is that most of the time when we speak about economics, we speak in normative, and that is fine. It is nothing inherently wrong about speaking in normative terms, but the positive is important, because the positive tells me and tells you what are the assumptions here. Okay, so this is an aspiration. Normative is what I want to see happening. I can say, well, an Islamic school should be a great and amazing Islamic school, but once you start saying that an Islamic school is better than every other school because every single student in that school study hard, never cheats, never bullies, have the best cooperative behavior with everybody else. Every teacher is an incredible role model for every single child, and so on and so forth, complete mastery of their field and so on. Now, I am mixing between two things here, that, this is this the reality of a typical Islamic school or a college or so on and so forth? Sometimes I give the example, in my experience, the first night I arrived to Malaysia in 1993 to attend the International Islamic University, I heard a bunch of my friends talking about the university and the challenges that it's going through. I really wanted to get up and go back to America, because it's like, oh, with all this mess happening at the university, how can this be even an Islamic university? Now, when of course, after going through this was, alhamdulillah, one of the best experiences of my life. There was a lot of negative, but there was a lot of positive, and the positive was much more. But here there's a problem there is a reality of how we are behaving because of problems with our worldview, of our aqidah, because of problems of understanding of Islam, or just like in basic personality problems, and then how things actually work, the fiqh of how we learn, and the fiqh of how we conduct ourselves in the fiqh here, just like deep understanding of how human behavior in the economic affairs. So the other area that I would like to take your open for your opinions and discussions on is economic policy independent from public policy or subservient to it? Sometimes we talk about economic policy in Islam as if it is separate from what's going on with the rest of the government, for example, and governmental policies. Sometimes what we're trying to achieve almost in any country is that the government has an objective, and then that translates into an economic policy. So sometimes we might spend a lot of time, like in one paper with my dear colleague, Dr. Ildus, we started with a statement that agricultural and food security is an important part of Islam. Okay, this is an assumption, or is this where is this coming from? So later on in the paper, we reformulated that if we as a community, as an ummah, as a group of people, as citizenry, as a government, decided that as agricultural and food security and self-sufficiency is a strategic objective, what do we do? How do we achieve that? Okay, so there's a little bit of a difference here. But sometimes I see people who are in the Islamic economic, they start with these general terms. Maybe we have to have, I remember this even with our dear Ustad Omar Chapra. I mean, he says like, well, in Islamic economy, we have the best of hospitals and the best of education and the best, and everything is provided practically for free to everybody. Now, these are policies. Is this really inherent features of the Islamic economics that we are talking about, or is this an objective that we try to strive? Once they become an objective, comes the next part. Okay, so is the purpose of economics is to serve the policy in the most effective and efficient manner? You know, let's say, and two features of this is that at least we try to prevent the harms of israf and tadbir. Now, if we go to the next level, advocate for the best allocation and use of resources, maybe by observing Allah's sunnah, how we interact, how we, how we actually conduct business with each other, how we appeal to our compassion, what is the basic fitrah that we have in this. So with this, I wanted to, connect the Tawheed and Aqidah and its impact on our economic behavior. And second, when we talk about economics, we start facing we need to be clear on some of the terms and purposes and the usages of economics. With that, I would like to hear some of your perspective before going to my next slide. Any contribution? Good, I can move on to my next slide. So, okay, we have Brother Daniel. Tafadhal.
My dominant impression is this, that there is nothing positive. I mean, so far,
yeah.
that's what my understanding is.
So that's interesting. If you think there's nothing positive, so like if say positive, so there's nothing in what motivates people to work. I mean, just understanding what motivates us to work, understanding and how that can be put in the best possible models to behave. If so, I mean, you're raising an interesting question, because for me, it's easier to say that there are just basic things like in economic behavior. Like if you're simply talking about there's a best way to manufacture a product. Okay, and that is, this certain mix of, we're talking about efficiency, we're talking about, good management, that still applies, right? So there's there is that like science part of, this is also tricky terminology, but I'm trying to emphasize that there is this what I'm talking about, like here, there is obviously there's a way that can exhibit israf and tadbir. For example, if I'm building a building and I am wasting lots of resources, and I come like, there is a better way of doing that. That is, if you build more supply chains, then we reduce food wastage. If we provide information to farmers, and they can supply the market with the right product at the right time with lower amount of waste. So this is, it is part of economics. It's part of doing business, doing good business, of economic, business, and finance. So all of that.
Dr. Mir Usman Ali, please.
Assalamu alaikum. So just the second question was, should economic policy be independent from public policy or subservient to it? So I just wanted to say that I think we shouldn't promote fragmentation of disciplines. I think it's important to view them as overlapping or mutually influencing each other. In other words, having a transdisciplinary or an interdisciplinary perspective. So I think this is somewhat related to the previous question: is economics positive or normative? And Brother Daniel said that not everything is normative, and everything has a normative element. So I think it is inevitably, and with Islam, everything has a moral element, right? So it would be kind of a narrow approach if we solely focus on economic policy as a science and as an issue of science, rather than see it as a social science. And just saying that I think they cannot be independent. Economic policy and public policy, I don't think they are independent. I don't know if which one is subservient to the other. I think they should have a mutual relationship. One shouldn't dominate the other. Just a few thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, Sister Muniza.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm on a mobile device again, I'm afraid, so I'll keep my video off. I'm not the most articulate person, so forgive me if what I say is not phrased in the correct terms. I can be quite blunt at times, and that's just part of who I am, I guess, and I'm sorry in advance. But
no.
I really object to the idea that you cannot be a millionaire if you are Muslim. And I find that the notion that to aspire for wealth is somehow wrong in Islam, to be something that the mullah spread, but really has no workable real life application. I've raised my children with the idea that they shouldn't get A grades for a certificate, that they shouldn't aspire to go to a top university for it to get a good job, but that they should do these things because they should be the best that they can be. And that is your biggest ibadah in this world, is to be the best human being that you can be. Because Allah Ta'ala has given us a brain, told us to read, and the only difference between us and animals really is our brain. So we should use it. If, as a consequence of that, a natural consequence of that, you end up going to a top university, you end up securing a fantastic job, you end up being quite wealthy at the end of it, you pay your zakah, you do your sadaqah, what is wrong with that? If we're creating this thing within our mosques, within our ideology, that somehow poverty is the ideal as a Muslim, then I object, because I think that disables our community and it doesn't allow us to function. Those same mullahs are very happy to take the sadaqah and the zakah without questioning, where it's coming from or how we earned it. So why is there constantly this notion that we must be poor? I appreciate that there are several hadiths which talk about Rasul's example of living in a very ascetic way, but there was never the notion that he was poor. There is also he was in charge of a community. He had the biggest share of the spoils of war. He in the Quran it says itself that he was an orphan and Allah Ta'ala made him without need. The fact that he chose to lead a life because he was spiritually inclined, but did not indulge in luxuries, did not mean that he was poor. And to tell our children that to be rich is wrong in Islam is quite frankly what puts us right at the bottom of the human pile of rubbish that we are in this world. And again, apologies for being blunt. Sorry.
No, that's a good comment, Sister Muniza. And always, everything. I encourage everybody to speak up, because this gives us everybody an opportunity to clarify. So I kind of purposely said billionaires, to kind of try to indicate people with incredible excessive amount of wealth and how that happens. But let's go back. What is the principle behind it? Is that can you become the basic statement from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that نعم المال الصالح للرجل الصالح. What is good wealth for the good person, and it's an incredible test, an incredible from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be given a lots of amount of wealth, because again, what I'm trying to emphasize many times or often, you see the pattern to become a billionaire. In the path to becoming a billionaire, you step and you may end up doing a lot of haram things, or like you have excessive and you trample the rights of many other people. Now, is this true in every single person, in every single billionaire? No, that may not be the truth, and inshallah there'll be some of us who are at that level. So yes, we need to have economic power. We need to have all of these things. So that's just one of the things that in having these massive conglomerates that exist today, inevitably there is lots of amount of israf, less of amount of tablir, and then just it is big for the sake of control, for the sake of ihtikar. I mean, just some practices that comes predatory pricing, all that comes in with when you are this massive. You look at what Google does to maintain its advantage, what Microsoft does, and all these other massive corporations. So there's just I'm indicating this, and let's say, just like you did, we want to have this critical engagement and conversation about these topics rather than making a final decision or statements on these matters. Jazakumullah khair. I really appreciate your comment. Yeah, and just back to Brother Mir's comment. So it just I'm trying to for us to investigate, are they separate? Where does economic policy come from, and how is that different from public policy? When they say like in for the Federal Reserve Bank, they're trying to maintain a balance between unemployment and inflation, for example. But that also came in from pressure from public policy, that you cannot just simply focus on inflation. You have to have the welfare of the people. So in the example of the Federal Reserve Bank, at least I know there are a lot of issues and limitations there. But the system as was designed at one time, like it wanted to have the input from all over the country, the United States, and that's why they have 12 branches. And they try to have representation in the governors or the board of governors of the Federal Reserve Bank from various industries and walks of life, so that everybody has a voice, for example. So this is just an example of, you're trying to have diversity and try to serve wider, set of interests, and not only the interests of the financiers, which might still, at the end of the day, that is the over dominant view, but at least in terms of design. Allah. So we have one more slide. Okay. So here, in this slide, I want to quickly share. Here's all these other incredible and interesting, notable economic perspectives challenging the status quo beside the Muslim ones. And they all come with incredible amount of wisdom and insights. And it is important for us, but then we also recognize that they come from a different paradigm. One way to see their shortcomings is to compare it to our worldview, our aqidah, and see how they are also different from what we are proposing. But the humanistic perspective comes very close to what we are trying to achieve by discussing its economic affairs as a phenomena. They try to do that. They talk a lot about human dignity and equality and all that stuff. And this is like, what is the purpose? Is it just a GDP, or is it the well-being of the human? And you can see again in this one it's a humanistic, so it is still the focus is on human being versus all of Allah's creation. Behavioral perspective is another way to try to open the closed mind of many economists, and then by introducing behavior. But even when the behavior is introduced, we try to, as much as possible, put it in mathematical modeling format. This is actually something I've done with PhD. I took networking as a factor, but I had to translate networking into a statistical and mathematical model. I still ended up with a very simplified two-agent model to simulate this behavior. So institutional perspective, like with Kenneth Galbraith, this is an important focus on the role of institutions and how, law and order, measures and, maintaining the right scales and measures and so on and so forth, and maintaining the relationship between markets and industries and the pricing mechanism, all of that. This is all part of the institutional perspective, and how important is our institutions in a well-functioning economy, just equitable economic, functioning. Ecological perspective. There's incredible contribution in this area, like with circular economy, and we know we have many Muslim scholars who are in this field as well, and they're nice. I mean, this is again, they're trying to have a holistic view of the world, and it's an important contribution. Post-Keynesian is something we've discussed previously. And it is kind of a coming Marxist thinking from the back door, but even Marxist thinking, it's interesting to see. It's really the focus when on the fulfillment of humanity's higher aspirations versus the tyranny of capitalism. So they come from an important point of view that we can appreciate, and this is maybe going to the comment earlier. If we meet others and we discuss with them, the point is not to agree with everything they're saying, but just to understand what they are focusing and what they are missing, and how are we going to be able to benefit, and what wisdom, what hikmah that they are saying that we can benefit from in constructing our perspective and worldview of economics, as well as what we think as maybe the sunan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how we interact with each other in the realm of economics, and how we can build normative objectives that we can strive towards. Allahu a'lam. Jazakumullah khair.
So, yeah, thank you, Dr. Zaid. If there are any comments on this, on just this point, on some of these perspectives, so maybe you can share it. If you have anything to comment on here.
I feel like Dr. Mahdi, you gotta have something going on in your mind.
I've been trying for an hour just to know how to raise my hand. I have to Google for like 20 minutes. I know there is this @y, so I can do @y. It's working with @y, but then I have to call my wife, and she couldn't find it. I mean, I say, okay. I'm teaching with Teams, so I'm not a big Zoom user. But anyway, I with @y, it's working just fine. So alhamdulillah. But no, I mean, there is, mashallah, thank you, Brother Zaid and Dr. Jiz as well for the good presentation here. I think this is great here. I understand. I'm sorry, as I said before, I teach economics here, but I really have, because of my frustration, I'm kind of 180 degrees what people are trying to do. And I understand Sister Muniza's like concern and frustration toward the Muslim community here. However, you know, Dr. Zaid, you talk about the you know, the concept of, you define economics as well-being, collective well-being here. But well-being is very subjective, and you can talk to 5 people, they will have different concepts of what we mean by well-being. And you know, I think economics is a very hard area, because you know, in our tradition, where would the Sahaba put economics at the center of the discussion? And every time we talk about, I mean, I'm not, again, I know nothing about Islamic economics. I know nothing about any Islamic studies in general. But my understanding is that we still have wealth being part of the maqasid, one of the, you know, preservation of wealth. But to me, it sounds more like, you know, please don't steal, you know, and try to be detached as much as possible from this materialistic world. And so, since we are all talking about economics here, I always go back to the same principle: is we as consumer or producer, what is our intent here? How can we, you know, try to redefine what we do in our daily life to be different, or not to be part of a system that is just pushing us to consume? And so we've seen that with what happened recently in Gaza, and may Allah alleviate their suffering and give them victory. But at least in the US, every time there is a corporation that is trying to support, even the 1% Muslim being here, have a huge impact through their consumption, through their voice. And so we see that just a handful of us can have a tremendous impact. And the system is designed that way. The system is designed to make us consume, to make us having more credits. So I understand Sister Moniza saying that we have to be part of a system to be wealthier, have a bigger pie. But at the end of the day, we're just contributing to the system. And so the question here is, how could we as Muslim be independent of the whole like globalization pattern, which is consuming more? Because as soon as you're going to stop consuming, as long as you shift the, you know, they sell iPhone because we buy iPhones. You know, they sell new cars because we buy new cars. But the day we stop buying new cars and we stop buying new iPhone, well, they're going to be in big trouble. And so they are creating their demand. They are, through their product, they are creating a demand. They are creating our wants, because we are not strong enough to say, no, I don't want that. I don't want to consume that. I don't need that. And as soon as we are not recognition of that, as soon as we are playing their game, I think as Muslim, you know, we should be able to say stop to that economic system here. And so redefine who we are as a producer and consumer is very important here, because even as a producer, if I want to do something, it's just for the sake of Allah and the sake of sustaining my family. It's not to enrich like the richer and extract more to the poor economies. I shouldn't have this intention here, making more money for the sake of making myself and my family richer. I think it's very, very dangerous here. Anyway, so that's just my 2-minute rant here. But I'm really in that type of situation where we as Muslims should question ourselves, should question our intention here. Every time we go and buy things on a daily life, if you see a product that is 50% off, do you really need it? Or because we are trying to make in your mind that if you buy this product, it is 50% off, you're gonna gain, because, you know, if it were to be 100, if it were to be like full price, you know, you would be worse off. So buy it and you're gonna be better off. This is the mindset we are trying to inculcate everybody in society. And it's just the wrong one. And it works with everything. It works with taxes. It works with, I mean, the whole system is made to make you believe that you're going to be better off by consuming more. And it's just wrong.
Yeah. Brother Mir Usman?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to ask Brother Zaid, I mean, the purpose behind this slide, because I mean, whenever I think of the Islamic perspective to economics, or the Islamic perspective to society, I always think of it as an integrative perspective, right? I see I say that what I mean by integrative is that it's not just humanistic, it's not just behavioral, it's not just institutional, it's not just ecological or anything else. It's a combination. It's something that integrates everything, and but the primary motive behind it is to worship Allah, is to serve Allah, and that is the fundamental our fundamental moral compass through which we decide everything else, right? So I think I mean, I just wanted to sort of clarify the behind sharing this, and also whether you are kind of setting it up as a contrast to the Maqasid perspective, or you know, this integrative perspective, which I think we all of us are interested in.
Allah yajzik khair. No, this is good. So now you're bringing this very interesting term, integrative. I would like to say at the Maqasid Institute, and Brother Idris can also definitely bring in his thought into this. At some level, maybe there's no difference between integrating knowledge or knowledge integration and the Maqasidi approach, but in other way, no, we're trying to, if you ask probably Sheikh Jasser, we say we are past integration. Integration, it's somehow, what we're calling for is that everything needs to be filtered down. So through the wahi perspective, through the worldview, through the aqidah perspective, so and the revelation. So all of these alternative and perspective that I'm listing here, humanistic, institutional, post-Keynesian, even capitalist perspective, they need to be filtered through the revelation. So the revelation is not just it's a process of integration. It's number one, you need to go through an intensive process of filtration. Number one, of anything that is obviously wrong and opposed to our worldview, to our ahkam, and so on and so forth. Next, whatever is filtered out, it needs to be now represented. Most of the time, needs to be redefined according to the purposes and the maqasid of the Quran al-Karim. So you have to bring it, and then labor relations or labor justice or environmental justice. Take that term and understand what it means, and then maybe perhaps redefine it in a different way to actually serve the purpose that the Quran al-Karim, for example, is advocating. So that is so we are really not talking about reintegration exactly. We are really talking about, number one, filtration. Second, really redefining everything to reconstruct our new knowledge. But in this course, number one, we were trying to bring brainstorming. We need to think about this. So I don't want to necessarily impose my point of view, but I want this to be a journey for all of us to recognize that integration is not the right way. Depends on how you're defining integration. What is the mechanism of this integration? Because you might define it in a way that end up being exactly what I'm saying. And then there's no difference really between the different approaches. But as I understand integration, because there was Islamization of knowledge, and that talked about just picking the what is good and then building on it. Then we said, no, it's more like integration, which is a bit more sophisticated process. And then here we're saying the next step, we're saying, no, it is maqasid methodology as a filtration and redefining and reconstructing the whole field, various fields, science fields, and understanding it also in terms of phenomena. So it's a really much more involved reconstruction of knowledge. Wallahu alam. Akhi Fawzi?
Maybe Brother Fawzi, yeah, please, Fawzi.
Yeah, so I just with this, whether this is these being presented to show what else is there, or it's a combination. I just wanted to say that it seems to me that once we understand that the initial law is acceptability or permissibility of everything, and then we scope it with what is taught by the Maqasid, we get closer to what it is and leave the technical jargons of whether it's integration or this or that. We know that unless there is a rule saying something is forbidden, the thing is right. And collectively through shura and engagement, using the principles of Maqasid, we get closer to our final goal of what is the way the Muslim must behave. So we can see integrations of any of these ideas, so far as they are correct and true, they belong to us. Ours is not an either us or them methodology, but what is acceptable and what is good. And we can pick and choose from any of the perspectives, so far as the idea is acceptable within the scope of the Maqasid and God's given laws. So this is just an angle I wanted, a perspective I wanted to draw on discussion, inshallah.
Yeah. So in the Maqasid methodology, to give you a quick answer, the rules that you mentioned, as long as the rules are silent, but this is incredibly dangerous if you follow this, because there are, what about the overall spirit of the Quranic message and the revelation? Because then you might find, I don't find anything specifically talking about the treatment of animal in this way, about ownership or about this or that. So that is that's why we have a lot of the Hiyal Sharia taking place in the area of finance, is because of this. So we say in the Maqasid methodology, say rulings, observing the rulings is one aspect of 7 elements that we have to bring together to bring not just compliance with a body of law, but really rising to the Islam's moral and intellectual leadership on affairs and making the world a better place. We have to go beyond just observation of rulings. Wallahu alam. Brother Jilani?
I think there's a couple of things here. So one is, if we're talking about what is our viewpoint, if we're talking about this viewpoint from a perspective of what is currently the world viewpoint, which is fundamentally capitalist, then that's one discussion, which I won't go into now, but that's a discussion around wealth, around people, around life, and how to live that life. And it's quite a big discussion, I'm sure you know, and everybody in this forum is probably well aware of the issues. But these are ideological. So this is an ideological perspective on what is an economic problem, or what is economics, or whatever. And so if you're talking about it from that point of view, then we have to bring in comparative ideologies like capitalism, communism, and so on. But I think for me, there's something, and I think this is probably what you're getting at, there's something lost in the way we approach economics. So if we put ideological aspect to one side, for me, there is Islam, the Quran doesn't have economic sections. It doesn't say this is an economic ayah, or it's an ayah of Quran. It's solving a human problem. And problems by their definition. So you raised in your last slide, should public policy come first or should economic? And I would say, well, these definitions are not relevant to us. They're relevant in the sense that you need to know what public policy means. But actually, we are trying to solve problems. And problems are naturally interlinked. And because they're interlinked, unless we have a very deep understanding of those problems, we cannot solve them. So the solution may not be economic, frankly. Right, the solution may be something completely different, right? But there is a requirement to understand and not compartmentalize, because this is a facet of Western education, to compartmentalize things and to say, this is like this or this is like that. It has its benefits, of course, but we have lost the ability to think in a holistic way. And I think that, for me, is the biggest loss I have seen of thinking. And the smartest people are people who used to be called polymaths, but this term is somehow misunderstood, because people think a polymath is a genius. It's not a genius. A polymath is just someone who understands deeply many things, many disciplines, and because he understands them deeply, he or she, sorry, I shouldn't just say he or she understands them deeply, they then can look at things holistically. And this is initially what Islamic scholarship was about initially. The system was, most of them were polymaths. That's why you can see they were talking about astronomy, physiology, metaphysics, and they're talking about biology, medicine, and Quran, and so on and so forth. So I think this is what I would say. I would say some of these terms are unhelpful. I think probably need to look at what is, and it's a simple point. It's a very simple thing to say, but it's actually very difficult, because problem solving, 80% of problem solving is understanding the problem acutely, I always find. And then the solution becomes obvious. Anyway, I don't want to overtake the conversation, but this is
No, you're 100% right, Akhi. That's why we have a challenge. That's why, like, worldview, paradigm, and even epistemology, all that. I mean, every time we use these terms, they come with a massive baggage behind them. They're used in a certain, but sometimes when it comes to Islamic economics, we just bring these terms and we say, like, we are integrating. Oh, look, you are using this terminology that meant, like, circular economy. Oh, we are all about circular economy. No, it's not. It's like you're bringing something that came from a perspective, that came from a worldview. You need to be very careful and using this terminology. But there is a challenge that, as somebody who studied Islamic economics, is that, when Islamic economics end up being, just it's really moral statements that we should be doing this, or when Islamic economics, I read a paper and providing why is circular economy is works better than anything else, and is based on hidden assumption that are not clearly stated. Like, one of the assumptions that paper was, you're really saying that there's no willful default on loans just because somebody wants to exploit, and so on and so forth. Just be clear on what you're trying to communicate and what is your idea and why would this idea works. This idea of when, like, somebody was assuming that people working in an Islamic cooperative will make higher rate of return, because he's obviously will be higher rate of return. Based on what? Why is it obviously going to make higher rate of return? You're making a major assumption. This is why I want to say that I think there's a lot of things we say in Islamic economics is based on this, our wishful thinking, or based on moral arguments that may not exist in reality, because unfortunately Muslims are not angels and they're not really behaving in this pattern, in this way. So that's why we say, like, we have a general problem. This is a general problem that is in the upbringing and the policies and how we are lecturing in the masajid and how we are seeing Islam. If you solve all of these things, then you get to this, equitable, community and society. We just need to be cognizant of what's happening here. Allahu alam. Akhi Daniel. And then maybe we have to move on.
I would just add to what Professor Zaid was saying, and I will quote one of my teachers here, Dr. Professor Rashid Ashad. He's a professor of philosophy. So in one of the lectures, he told us that, I think according to Hazrat Umar Radiallahu Anhu or Hazrat Umar bin Abdul Aziz, may Allah forgive me, I don't remember correctly, but I'll check it. According to that, if a person doesn't know the ills of the modern or the context a person exists in, the person is an illiterate. So from one point of view, these what you call perspectives which are prevalent in the society, it is imperative for us to understand them. So I think Dr. Zaid is doing the right thing, that he's pushing us to understand these things. And Imam Ghazali, I think also he did that as well. when he wrote that book, which was against the Western philosophy, not Western philosophy, I would say Greek philosophy at that time. So first, what he did was he understood it properly, and then after that, he was able to critique as to what are the problems. So I think this might address the concern of Brother Usman as well. In a way, it is important to understand, what is humanistic perspective, what is institutional perspective, and all of these perspectives, so that we can appreciate Islam better as well. I think it will help us in that perspective as well. It's just a point of view. Thank you.
But this is important because you're connecting everything here together, and I want to connect it with Sister Ambreen comment so we need to operationalize. Once we start talking about operationalizing, then we get to a point where we are hit a reality. This is normative and this is positive, and in this context is that the positive is that, for example, when the Prophet ﷺ was about, do not meet people outside the limits of the Medina, let them come to the market. That will bring fairness. So while I can understand the positive statement here is that the more, people share, have a central place, big marketplace with all the information coming into this place, then there will be a more equitable outcome versus that. The need to write contract, clarify things so rights are more clear and justice is served when we write down our contract, especially debts and so on, and obligations. So this is positive statements that if we do this, then this will happen. We know that if there is a famine, then there is an impact on prices in the market. We know that if you mistreat your employees, then they might go and steal. And if that happens, then this is like positive statements. You do this, then this happens. This is a cause and effect, let's say. Can we think, what is the cause and effect that happens in this situation? And one example that was, and this is actually lived reality, was in Indonesia and Sumatra and other places where they had a model in the village where all the boys, like from 6 to 16 years old approximately, they don't spend the night at the house, at their own homes. They actually go to the masjid and they live there from Maghrib prayer until Fajr. They go, they pray Maghrib, they study, they exercise, they learn Islamic knowledge, and they actually, so imagine all the boys in the village in the masjid together. And then when this was shared with me, look, this is very interesting. There's an economic perspective into this. There is social, there is educational, there is psychological, there is all of these things in this. But at least from my perspective, and this is where where economics, look how much less resources the whole village is using. All these boys do not need to have their own rooms, and then all the they're having their dinner in the masjid. They're pulling of resources in terms of food. There's probably less wastage. So this is positive. I am bringing positive thinking, cause and effect and consequences of having this kind of structure, societal structure or social structure, and what that means in terms of tabdir and israf, for example. And this is operationalizing, perhaps Islamic perspective. And this is diversity. It works there, may not work elsewhere, but we can say that this actually was a reality for hundreds of years in a Muslim society. And we can benefit from it, we can abstract from it, and maybe we can spread that, and the same example does exist right now. We call it boarding schools. So, and there are boarding schools all over the world. So that does exist, subhanAllah. And just an example of operationalizing or thinking, looking at the economic side of a phenomena.
Okay. let us move on and just on to the last point. I know we have a couple of more points, but I want to go directly to the idea, not application. Here we can talk about the education, research, and action. It is very important. But just for the last part, if I may, Dr. Zaid, because we do have like 20, maybe 30 minutes. I want to touch on this. What do we mean by economic phenomena, and actually, what is the scope? I think these two things are quite important, and so we have a general understanding for what is worldview, how it affects our thinking, and then what do we need to change that way of thinking. But then, how do we define economic phenomena? So if we look at the economics as the study of trying to find a solution to the economic problem, and the economic problem is usually stated as to produce what, to whom, and at what cost. All right, so this is where you talk about efficiency, about the resources, about scarcity. Well, it's a different worldview altogether. But then, if we look at phenomena as from a transdisciplinary perspective, then we see it as something fairly complex, very complex, and these are multifaceted processes, and so these are dynamic systems. So we can, using this modern language, we can use this dynamic system processes. And so these are complex and multifaceted and processes and interactions that extend beyond the conventional boundaries of economics. And those conventional boundaries are actually in those disciplines. So it is narrow view of to produce what, for whom, and at what cost, and looking at the scarcity and competition, and maybe some other related concepts. But then it is the economic phenomenon would encompass a wide range of elements, and they involve in the dynamic interplay of all these factors like religious, social, cultural, environmental, and technological. So everything is interconnected. All of these factors, and this is always it is a dynamic. And even by using this dynamic systems language, you can define it in terms of the resources and the flows and resources within those systems. But then they touch upon all those factors, societal, social factors, individual factors, having to do with individual psychology, with having to do with social psychology, and so on. And of course, all of that is shaping the production, distribution, and consumption of resources across all different life systems. And so these things, they arise from the various levels of connections. What we say that there is interdependency, and our dependency on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also interdependency of humans with the other humans and with the environments, and so on. And so this is where we see that the phenomena, when we focus, we try to reframe the question. So we are not looking at the economic question as defined in neoclassical economics, for example. And also we try to move away from from all those limitations that we talked about last week. And also, Sabrina, I think she also mentioned in one of the about the textbooks. The first part is excellent. I mean, it's talks about the worldview and quite detailed. But then it goes, and many textbooks just go and use the same old approach. Just wearing if you use Professor's language, using this garb or the what's it, abaya, to explain the same thing. All right, so here we try to reframe the question. And so what is the scope of, in my view, I mean, this is just my proposition to you for discussion. So when I teach Islamic economics, for example, when I talk about the economic systems and you know, the economy at all, this is what I present. Usually, the whole discipline of economics studies these things. So the whole system, then the policy, and the analysis. Well, the economic systems, when we study systems and the policy, it can be either or. It can be a positive study, it can be normative, or it can be a mix of those two. Economic analysis is usually positive study. I mean, empirical study. But even then, you can use a lot of additional methods. I mean, qualitative methods. But if we reframe, let's try to reframe the scope of this reimagined discipline. And again, this is just my imagination today, that we don't study the economic system as it is proposed in economics textbooks, but we try to look at higher level at life systems. Even though I understand that if we talk about life systems, it looks like we talk about biology. All right. But isn't, I think one of the authors, and maybe Sister Ambreen also can help with that, one of the authors, I think from Pakistan, is in the latest the textbook on Islamic economics, he suggests that maybe biology is a better way to, or methodology is a better way to look at economics. And so, you know, life systems are all the systems that make life possible. And we can enumerate, we can look at them, you know, like the society is a system, the individual person is a system, and all the environment and everything is a system, and all the political system again is part of that. And also on the other hand, we see economic policy. So what are the economic policies, you know, in terms of fiscal policy or monetary policy, or some other related policies that are designed to either minimize unemployment or you know, minimize the inflation and so on. Should we better look at public policy as something you know, higher, at a higher plane, not as something that is well, I'm not in that sphere, so I just you know, I'm just trying to suggest and think out loud, rather than talking about economic policy in this reimagined discipline. Maybe we can talk about something higher, and even public policy. We could rethink how to redefine it. So it is all semantics. You know, what do we what term do we use? What term do we use? And lastly, in terms of economic analysis, should we move beyond the quantitative economic analysis using only the tools in econometrics and statistics and mathematics, and use kind of transdisciplinary analysis, which is probably incorporates that as well, but using some other additional tools that we can discuss. So in my imagination, this discipline, the scope of this discipline is more talking about the life systems. Maybe it is biological and social, societal, and individual as well, and of course the religious. Now, systems. Then public policy, however you want to define it, and also transdisciplinary. And in transdisciplinary analysis, we have a lot of a lot of examples in terms of how the scholars today in this field, in transdisciplinary field, how they approach problems. And this is where I really appreciate Brother Jelani's also comment on that. We need to understand the problem. What is the problem exactly? And having a transdisciplinary view of these problems really helps us to move forward and actually define, maybe widen the scope, but also look at the tools and analysis. We can narrow them down whenever we see a specific problem. So it's a definition and the scope and the tools as well. So these are just some of the ideas I think are very important for us to discuss in the remaining 10, 15, 20 minutes, however you want to proceed. So please, I think Dr. Zaid, if you want to comment on this.
No, this is a good way of connecting the stuff we've been talking about from the beginning. Allah yajzak khair, inshallah. I definitely would love to hear from you, from the participants. What did we say today, or was said today that you completely disagree with? I'll be curious. That you felt like absolutely against, you think is completely wrong.
Yes,
Brother Dr. Mir.
Yes, I mean, I really like this slide which shared by Professor Ildus. I wanted to sort of share an idea that I had also posted in the comments, is that, and I agree with Brother Jelani's idea as well, that Western social science tends to segment and fragment aspects of life. But as human beings, we are holistic beings, right? And we are not just economic persons. We are not just economic man or sociological man. We are the creation of Allah. We are supposed to be the vicegerents on earth. So it inevitably implies a holistic perspective, that we must take a holistic perspective to any problem. Now the thing is, what is the holistic perspective, right? So the thing is that how it affects us is through this through the assumptions that we have about how life operates, how we ought to think in a particular set of circumstances, what are our assumptions on which we ought to base our decisions and our thinking and our action and the navigation of daily challenges. So I believe that it is these assumptions that should be, these deep assumptions that should be informed by the revelation, right? And the revelation should be our fundamental moral compass, right? But that doesn't mean that we forget about these other transdisciplinary perspectives, because ultimately, like I said, the idea is to be a holistic human being who is responsible for caring for the world and for humans and Muslims and everyone. So there's this concept of the meteor. I can potentially share it. I can have a research paper on it. It was actually discussed by other scholars before me, and I just used it in a research paper that talked about the use of body-worn cameras by the police. But the idea, I think, is can be extrapolated over here. It speaks to the internalized assumptions that we have about how we navigate our lives. And the basic idea is that in this modern society, these assumptions are not based in revelation, right? If these assumptions are based in our revelation, the Quran and Sunnah, then we will have a different world. So how do we bring about that change? And that paper speaks to that a little bit. And there is other literature out there that also speaks to it, and I'd be happy to share it, inshallah.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I just bring one very... yeah.
Go ahead, Ildus.
Well, just one example. When I was doing my course at the INSEAD on Islamic finance, Islamic banking and finance. My graduation paper was about the speculation. And usually you look at you look at the financial markets as the necessity of financial markets and even in Islamic finance, Islamic banking. Also, they talk about this. It's the role of it is to provide liquidity. Right, so it's to provide liquidity in the system, in the financial system. And now you can look at this issue from many different perspectives. Actually, the speculation. You can call it speculation, even though trading in stock market, trading in forex market. It is looked at in a very positive way, even though there is evidence that more than 90% of all the transactions in those markets are done specifically just for speculation. Now, you can look at it from many different perspectives, as I said, and one of them is to go back and look at the law. For example, the common law, or some from the United States, even at the 19th century, even end of 19th century. How does the law treat speculation? The contract for difference. And law actually treats it very negatively, and but then it is accepted as a financial market tool. Then also another way to look at it is also to look at the life of traders. Who are the traders, and the psychological problems that are arise out of trading. I was a trader myself also. And that actually knowing from the inside how the system is built to gain you. I mean to make you believe that you can make some money, even if you trade in millions that I used to do. But the market makers have all the advantage, and even because they build the system and they know how to gain it. And there are many other ways to look at it, and of course the psychology studies, and there are studies from psychology that look at what actually happened to traders and so on. Just as an example that you can have. By defining one problem, looking at it from different perspectives, this is what I thought at that time in 2008, 2009. So just as an example, yeah. Brother Jalal, yes.
Brother Jalal. Are you mute? On mute, sorry.
It always helps when you unmute. So I just wanted to give a more recent example of this. But by the way, this is a very good slide. It really does explain very well. So if we look at the way private equity works, right? Private equity is essentially they raise money, they buy firms, and they usually take 51%. That's the aim. So then you actually control that firm, and the idea is you make within 5 years 3 to 4 times the amount of money you put in. That's the target. Now the question is, so if you were to frame this and say, does one, is a private equity good? Well, that's normative, right? That's it's not really a relevant question. But if the question is private equity activity good for an economy? That's a different question entirely, because you then have to look at a holistic set of issues. So, for example, most private equity firms do not really care about the well-being of staff, right? So the first thing they will do is they will cut the payroll, and they will then try and maximize the profit. They will then artificially increase particular types of revenue, which from an accounting point of view looks good, but it may not be good for the company. So, for example, if you take a recurring set of income statements, so if you take something which comes in every single year fixed from a technology point of view, that is valued at, say, 20 times your profit. Whereas if you value something which comes in every year and has to be re-raised every year, so for example, if you have to go and win more business, the same business every year, that's valued at maybe 3 or 4 times. So you're going to prioritize those things which give you the bigger return. But this is actually just a financial trick, right? It's just an accounting trick. Now, what is the impact of this? Well, what tends to happen is when you start to buy companies and you invest lots of money in those companies, and you artificially inflate them, you are killing off competition. Because there are also other companies that have been running for 20 years, and they're not using the private equity model. And the problem with that is this one company may buy those companies out, or may become so big that it can start to impact prices. So it will lower the prices artificially, kill competition, and grow very big. So then you then have to ask, is this good for employees? Is this good for competition? And is this good for market manipulation? Right? So what I'm trying to say is there is a social impact, there is a competition impact, right? And there is a political impact. Now, if you compartmentalize this, you're only looking at the economic aspect of that one micro firm, and you're divorcing all these other issues. And if you look at one of the problems in the US, there's a massive disconnect between demand and supply. And one of the reasons for that is because when wealth is massively disparate, when you've got really big firms and you've got lots of money in very small numbers, and the rest of the economy haven't got a demand that can catch up, or haven't got the wealth that can catch up, you're actually killing demand. And if you kill demand over a long period of time, you start to go into a stagflation type approach, which is what we have in Japan, for example. So this holistic view is what's actually missing. And it does come from a worldview which is slightly different to ours anyway. Well, not slightly, very different to ours. But I think what I'm trying to say is we often misdissect these problems. So I think this is a good example of something that needs to be looked at from a life system. And I think rather than just looking at a economic policy, which is, should we encourage private equity, from a purely economic point of view, we need to look at it from a public policy point of view, which is it good for society? And that's a big question. So anyway, I just wanted to give an example of that. So.
Thank you so much. Wanted to give one, hopefully maybe last quick example of just like how we violate the worldview. And this is from last year's paper presented for the International Islamic Fiqh Academy. And the topic was specifically maqasid and contracts. So one of the papers started by saying how riba is incredibly haram and destructive and bad. And then the second half of the paper said, but there is a necessity. Islamic banks really have to use LIBOR to set up their pricing and everything. So, well, you started by saying riba is incredibly haram and bad and destructive. Well, what is LIBOR based on? I mean, of course, it is all interest-based. And on top of LIBOR being interest-based, we also, have you read about all the manipulation of LIBOR by all the biggest banks and that are in there? So you're ignoring that it is haram, you're ignoring that it is, and you say that but it's the necessity, so we'll use it. So, okay, so when I say be clear about your assumptions, be clear about what you're saying. So you're saying that despite the bad that comes from LIBOR, it is even worse if Islamic banks don't use it. Is that what you're saying? That we're gonna end up? How are you measuring bad and destructive power if riba leads to a war from Allah Subhanahu wa Taala and His Messenger? So what is this? How did you justify? What is this incredible maslaha or benefit in the short term and in the long term that you're talking about that leads to justifying the use of LIBOR. And from that LIBOR, every single Muslim keep asking, well, so what's the difference? So what's the difference between the two systems? So this is again an example of like, if this is our worldview that riba is haram, then we cannot justify LIBOR. And it is riba is haram and destructive at this incredible level, then we have to have some incredibly important reason that it's like a survival thing, that if we don't do, then we will, then we'll be in an incredible hardship that is worse than using a riba system. So just be clear on your assumptions, be clear on your argument when you're making these positions, so that we can easily follow your logic, or the logic of that a person is presenting, and presenting as an Islamic economics. Allahu Alam. So I think our time is up, so we can conclude officially, and then we can stay afterward for a few more minutes, inshallah. So, Brother Daniel, is it okay if we conclude officially with Sister Ambreen, and then you're welcome to stay behind, and we can have a conversation, inshallah.
Thank you.
Sister
Can I ask something?
Sure. So let me conclude
Oh,
officially.
please,
So
sorry.
thank you so
Please
much
go ahead.
for
Sorry, sorry.
everyone for your valuable time. Inshallah, see you next Saturday. And have a good weekend, inshallah. Let's end our session with the Surah Al-Asr, and then we continue. Sure.
All right. Jazakumullah
Those
khair.
who want